Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby. Today, I am delighted to be joined once again by Roy Saadon from Access Fintech. Roy, how are you?
Good, sir. Good morning, good afternoon. Well, it could be playing at any time of the day, so hi to everyone. Yeah.
Take your pick. Yeah. Roy, we had you on the on the show last year. It's great to have you back on again. Always love talking to you. I think there's a great pedigree. But for those of you who missed last time's show, give us a little bit of background to Access Fintech.
Yeah. So Access Fintech is a 4-year-old startup company. Started with private angel investing, and in 2018 we raised money from the industry. So we had investment from JP Morgan, Citi, Credit Suisse, and Goldman Sachs. We are a collaboration company focused on data collaboration, workflow, and really trying to collapse the bespoke processes that happen across every financial institution and try and bring it to a more efficient and a centralized way of working.
I think that there's a key word in that, which is collaboration.
Yeah.
And I think that's there's probably no more relevant word right now, through everything that's been going on. Tell us a little bit about how how collaboration in your opinion can be the key to everything that we're seeing at the moment.
From a size perspective, we kind of considered growth startups. So we're in that place where we're trying to get momentum and we're a network company, and network is always about escape velocity, or kind of getting to that point where the network is sustaining itself. And when this event happened, it was it's either headwind or tailwind. You're not going to come out of this without any impact whatsoever. So it's either going to be, I remember the conversations where we sat there when everything was happening. We were trying to figure out how do we actually harness this, because change agent is always a great factor if you just know how to position your trajectory to be supported by the activity. And I say apologetically, it's not that you wish a pandemic to justify your business proposition, but it definitely was the case that collaboration became even more important, and it was becoming an important paradigm, but it became mission critical in a very short time frame. Because we think about what happened in this ecosystem, the volumes were unprecedented across February, March, April, unprecedented, to the point where systems capacity was being challenged across the board. And the elastic part was kind of the technology. The inelastic is the human factor. How much can I do with a given, because I can't exactly remove, upgrade or downgrade the amount of employees working. And then you add on top of that the work from home. So that created both a cultural and a physical challenge.
Yeah.
And then on a given day, every bank has to work with another bank and do it collaboration. Now I had to do it within my own firm because I don't even sit next to a desk with anyone and I can't shout across and do that. So collaboration became an internal and an external problem. And I needed to find ways of addressing that immediately. Now, collaboration is a massive remit and it's a very hot agenda, but you have to slice it down. Our collaboration is focused on data first. I need to understand what data I'm collaborating on and what my workflow is with regards to the data. I think we were lucky enough to have all the right pipes in place. So when this thing happened, everyone just opened the faucet and the data started flowing through the pipes with immediacy, and the volumes just went through the roof. But it just emphasized the need to be able to work, because none of the problems are usually solved by one individual, one firm. It's multiple individuals, all goes across firms, and that collaboration became even more critical in the work from home environment. So yeah, I mean, collaboration is a hot topic, but specifically in this ecosystem, it made us a mission critical system overnight.
And I think that's something which we focused on all the way through this sort of series is companies who've been able to take this negative and in the best possible way turn it into a positive.
Yeah.
That's been something which has been epitomized by Access Fintech throughout this. Tell us a little bit about how you've taken the positive from this and what you're seeing in the business.
Yeah, I mean, the lucky thing is, first of all, we belong to an industry that A, is resilient, but B, was also, I think if you're in the hospitality or the service industry, there's almost no way around it, right? The impact is dramatic because your cash flow has been completely decimated from almost day one.
Yeah.
You look at the airline companies, et cetera. So you kind of have to be, first of all, in an industry that's resilient, and it's a virtual industry because a lot of what we do is data driven. And the second thing that happened, the volumes, I mean, we were looking at it and said, okay, the volumes are through the roof. Clearly we're doing things. What do we do in order to harness that? And that was the conversation. It was literally a conversation. You sit down and you try to plot your strategy and say, okay, what is my role in this activity? Specifically, we care about things when they go wrong. And that's why you collaborate, because for the things that go well, it's like hands free and let the machines do what they do. And when the volume went up, even if I was still dealing with the same error rate as I was before, in absolute terms, the numbers went up, and I had a much bigger book of work to fit into the same time frame that I had. And we needed to find a different way of reducing that overhead of work that we have. And we have no other magic wand other than collaboration. So it's about getting participants to work with each other and collaborate. And as part of that, we actually took an initiative of offering our service free of charge to participants who had these, what we considered at a time, temporary bottlenecks. So how do we become a good citizen of the industry and offer our service to try and alleviate some of the bottlenecks? But you kind of know that if we add value at that point in time, then people see the value also on normal days. So while the objective was, happy to take risk and absorb additional cost and do that, but it really was about being part of the whole industry, part of the resolution cycle, offering the solution, offering the product for free. And I think, we're getting the benefit of that now with Pipeline Accelerated, with people understanding much better hands-on what the word looks like when you start embracing collaboration versus before it was in theory and on paper. I see the value. Those 2 months made it real, and we just had an opportunity to help, but also to promote our product.
Yeah, I think that goodwill equity has been a sort of real feature of some of the best businesses that I've seen position themselves through all of this. There's a right thing to do, but there's also, as we know, a long-term positioning piece, from this that companies have invested in and are seeing themselves come through. How does that change? When's the right time to change that model?
I have to say, listen, it's my personal opinion, right? I don't think you need to overplan those activities. Our clients are top tier banks and the biggest asset managers. The objective was we're here to help. And if you're going to use it on a continuous basis, I don't think I have to explain to them that there's going to be a commercial aspect to it at some point, and we do that. So I don't think it's a controversial issue. And I think our industry is so based around liability, protection, and liability. No one wants to use a system that they can't protect with a contract anyway. So if I'm using it, I'm going to pay for it. So if anything, the minute they start using it, sometimes you get the clients saying, all right, we've got to put pen to paper here because I'm using something. I need to get through the right approvals. I need to go through right InfoSec. I need to get the right onboarding. I can't just do that. What I did on a 24-hour window on a weekend is not something that I can sustain on an ongoing basis through eternity. But I do think that I think for people outside the industry, no one understands the pressure points that we should go to. There was an interesting article at the Financial Times about the weekend exercise, and we were part of that weekend exercise of how to alleviate stress. But I think my concern was never about alleviating or being able to convert. My biggest concern is you take a bit of a risk, because if you offer something in a very short time frame with very little planning, sometimes it just doesn't work. You're not able to provide enough impact, and then you get a boomerang effect. If I didn't prove it when I really needed to, I'm actually going to lose momentum with the guys that said, listen, we gave you the window and now you didn't. So it was nervous times. I mean, we were working for about 3 days, 48 hours, 72 hours flat, nonstop working, trying to get everything ready for a very specific industry event. Yeah, and sometimes you pinch yourself and say, what am I doing? It's like, is the risk worth it? So that was a bigger concern than converting clients.
I think there's been above and beyond work that's sort of, again, been another characteristic of businesses that have really worked to position themselves through this, and it's interesting to see. I also think there's a very interesting sort of dynamic for you as a sort of do you still call yourself startup, or is it growth mode that you're in now, scale up? But a startup scale up with such an interesting diversity of geography as much as anything else. You've got small offices in Israel, in London, and in New York. How's that been? What's it been like looking across the picture across the world?
I mean, you definitely feel like you're part of a global experiment of unprecedented scale. And in the pre-chat we were saying, when you're in university and you do an experiment, you kind of know what the outcome is. You just need to prove that you can get there. Here there is no known outcome because we've never done anything like it. And we were seeing the different geographies' responses with the different restrictions. Israel was 100-meter lockdown from home. In London, I could go to the office 3 or 4 weeks later. New York was a different approach. I can't even say New York because the US was a different approach, and within that, different states were different approaches. So it really was, you have to adjust. again, luckily, knock on wood, small companies with a modern stack and cloud-based, the work from home, work from the office dilemma is a lot easier and almost a non-issue. We didn't have a physical office for the first 2 years, so it was a very easy transition. But even so, there's different geography jurisdictions. There is different psychological issues, right? The whole work from home has been, who's being affected the most? Is it, I was struggling the most with people who have kids and the entire ecosystem and support system has failed because there's no school and no parents and no access. But anyone personally impacted. But there's anecdotal stories. I have an employee who's stuck in New Zealand for 3 months now, flew out and hasn't been able to come back. More than that, he flew out to get married. So his wedding got canceled and then he got stuck there. And we had another employee that was stuck in Orlando for 7 weeks. But listen, but my heart at the end of the day goes out to the affected families and individuals. Luckily, no one in the direct circle has, but you just go one circle beyond that and you start seeing people who are impacted both from hospitalization all the way to people who've lost family members. And, on the one hand, you're very eager to go back to the office because you feel like it's two separate worlds. I'm not impacted, therefore I can go back to the office because no one around me has been impacted. But you start reading the personal stories and then you take a step back and say, well, maybe we shouldn't rush into it because we can do what we can do without the office. So that balance is different. But our Israel office is now fully back in office every day. Our New York and London offices are still closed. And our New Zealand office is still open because it's still out there. So
that's thriving.
Exactly. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Israel. They're back in over there. Was there reticence about going back into the office? Was there concern about it? Is it a different story completely to London and New York?
It's interesting what, it's infrastructure, right? And what in the infrastructure works and doesn't work. So on the one hand, the office is open. On the other hand, public transport isn't. And Israel is a country that's log jammed with traffic anyway. So, we gave the employees the option to continue working from home, if they're reticent to go into the office and don't want to deal with the stress of crowded environments or just have issues with that. But a lot of people have the appetite to come into the office. So now I have to figure out how do they get into the office. But the first comment was, if you don't have a way of getting into the office, it's not mandatory. You can continue doing what you're doing. I go back. I think the school system being open is much more important. I think the attrition has been on working parents who now have to be full-time parents, full-time employees, and again, without even the support system of grandparents who have always been around in the background to do that because now they're at risk population. So that's what we were trying to accommodate for. So office being open, I would say we're about 60% in the office. And the differential is giving people optionality to come back at either a pace they feel comfortable with from a health perspective, or the risk that they're taking, or just the challenges of as mundane as commute. I just don't have a way of commuting because there's no public transport. So how do I get to the office?
Yeah, I think that's one of the key areas, isn't it? That sort of choice. This is a situation that is impacting people in many different ways and in many different circumstances. There's people there who are desperate to get back into the office because of their circumstances. There's people there who are a little bit more concerned, particularly the logistics of. I think probably the biggest trouble for me is the logistics of getting people in through public transport, which is another great issue. But I think from what I know, you guys have done a great job, as you say, that you were set up there for a couple of years of a virtual setup. It's obviously very different now with a company at a completely different size and scale. Tell us a little bit about how you've kept that sort of culture that's been so important to the growth of the business alive with it.
Listen, I feel like the hardest thing who gets impacted by the work from home is growth and absorbing new employees, because the culture is important. You're trying to create a certain DNA of the company. And when you worked together for a certain amount of time and you met in coffee shops or you met in temporary offices and not a permanent office, but you continuously spoke. And when you're a small company, you talk to each other all the time. I was on video and phone calls from the beginning. And then we had offices and we had pretty aggressive travel between them to create that culture. My hardest challenge right now is how do I absorb someone brand new, educate them on what we do, but also educate them about the culture and let them absorb from the culture of creativity and client-centric approach and the collaboration between our own offices. And it's a very hard uphill battle for someone, for the the person who's mentoring and for the person who wants to be part of a community and wants to be part of this company. So I think for me, the hardest thing that has been impacted is hiring. Our ability to continue to function has been very resilient. But we're also lucky that the drop-off between office working environment and home working environment, there has been a drop-off. In locations where the work environment from home is dramatically different than the office, then you lose efficiency. And in our business, where there's a lot of outsourcing to remote destinations, sometimes that drop-off has been dramatic and lost in efficiency. So again, you can't control it. There's a lot of luck in this ecosystem, right? The fact that we're in an industry where the volume was growing, we're in an industry that I could work from home, the fact that my centers were allowed me at par work from home and work from the office environments. But hiring is literally frozen. Even though there's fantastic talent out there and you want to absorb, you want to help the economy, but wherever you can, try and expand and actually tap on that. But that is one thing that I literally have to wait till we get a bit more of an office culture in order to be able to absorb new talent in.
So there's been some interesting views on that. I've been speaking to certain people who've sort of opened up to that opportunity for talent and capitalized on it and sort of had significant success on board. Speaking to a company the other day that over the 10 weeks have taken on 12 people over that period. So they've got 12, for a 30-person business when it started to become a sort of 43, 44-person business now over that period, having not met physically. So a huge chunk of their business is a pretty bold stroke for in my mind with that. And we've seen people who've pressed the pause button a little bit, and people who've gone through that. What was the thinking between pausing and continuing capitalizing on that sort of stuff? Because it's an interesting phase of growth for you, and as you say, look, businesses surge forward, headcount not, which creates its own challenges at the same sort of time as well, I guess.
We had almost like a perfect storm in multiple aspects. Our volume and usage literally went through the roof. We're talking about 1,000% growth in a 1 quarter cycle, but at the same time the market in general is going the other way. So it slowed down. We're in the middle of raising funding. So on the one hand, until I lock down the funding, which takes longer, we didn't want to grow. So that was one dynamic, and the other one was just the personal strain on the activity. I think it depends on the roles that you hire. It depends on the company that you are. We're a tech company, and deep technology with a lot of client interaction. So there's a lot of, it takes a couple of months for you to be productive in a company like ours. There's a lot of learning. So the learning curve, how do you accommodate that? I think the way for us to address it with hiring is you just limit the potential population of candidates to people that you ought to have worked with before. So at least from a DNA perspective, it's not teaching you the company and teaching you the culture and teaching you the product and teaching you the ecosystem. I need to eliminate some of the parameters. So by natural gravitas, you kind of try, okay, if I bring people that worked with me before, then at least the DNA component or the personal aspect, we can get around it because there's an understanding. Now, they could have been clients, they could have been peers, they could have been colleagues, but still, it's someone that understands and worked with closely. It doesn't have to be all former employees. So it just, I think, changes a little bit your hiring perspective. But we can't wait to be able to go back on the growth curve again, because the business growth is going to be matched by capacity as well.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that sort of connectivity. I mean, look, we talk about collaboration in the industry, and that's this being very much the sweet spot for you guys. But there's also a huge thing there about collaboration for teams that are as diversity spread as you guys are now. Yeah. What are some of the things that you guys have done well to keep that harmony and connectivity in the business? Yeah.
Listen, we invested a lot. I say invested a lot, but I keep walking around with the feeling that we should have done more, right? Because you always kind of look in hindsight. You never knew how long this was going to be. Yeah. We created virtual happy hours. We created virtual stand-up meetings that were continuous the whole time. So I know that at least in London, I'm going to see all my colleagues visually every Friday for virtual happy hour. So at least you have a chance to do that. And I try to randomly call people across all the offices just to check the pulse and see how things are. But even as I say that, names start running through my head, and I go, I haven't spoken to that guy in 3 months. I haven't spoken to that guy, sorry, in 3 weeks. I haven't spoken to that guy in 6 weeks. And I go, oh, this just isn't good enough. I'm not investing enough time in the inbound facing activity. But you just have to invest a lot more time. And we're also lucky to have managers who all embrace that same thing. So even if I don't, I know that the manager of the team is doing that activity within that team. So you have to rely on the whole ecosystem kind of being together and knowing how to do that. But we definitely invested a lot in the creating those pressure valves, both psychologically and from a work perspective, to make sure that we talk to each other enough. Even if there's no content, but just create those drum beats so we interact with each other.
There's a very interesting challenge you sort of put on that, and you know, you can tell you're sort of beating yourself up a little bit about making sure that everyone's covered, you know, throughout all of it. It is an unprecedented situation for a leader as much as anything. That you've got a stellar track record. You know, you co-founded Trana and took it through what I would imagine to be you know a couple of pretty difficult times in 2001 and 2008 and 2008 in particular. You're now back in it with something even more difficult. So talk about you as a leader of a business, as a CEO of a company, and sort of sailing through this. What's been some of the sort of challenges on your plate, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I have to say that there's two things. There's the business and the company. I think for vendors in general, change is always an opportunity. Okay, whether it's regulatory change, whether it's market events change, macro events, it's really hard because as a vendor, effectively what you do is you're trying to change the buying organization, telling them there's a better way of doing things. Sometimes I just got a better piece of technology. Sometimes I'm trying to say, no, collaboration is better than doing it on your own. And that change is hard enough as it is. When the clients are forced to reevaluate what they do in a very short time frame and force change on themselves, and these events force change, regulation forces change, you got to find a way to be part of that fabric and find a way to make that, well, if you're already changing, you really should put me in that ecosystem, because you're doing that painful exercise once, you're not going to do it twice. So for me, this moment of change, you got to find a way to make yourself part of that ecosystem, because the mindset has already shifted and the attention is about change, and the attention is not necessarily about keeping things as they are or growth or protection of territory. And for us, change was a few things. Even before this corona pandemic, which created a massive change, before that was the banks evaluating what they are and trying to figure out, how do I deal with differences that Google and Amazon and Tencent are bringing to my ecosystem and changing my distribution and my relationship with clients. So that was a big change. CSDR is a big change. So there's a bunch of these that are lined up. It just seems like there's more changes happening, bigger changes in smaller timeframes. Is kind of the new world that we live in, and whether they're external. So as a company, you have to always ask yourself, how do I harness that change to be something to make me part of the solution rather than be another problem in a way? From a company-wise, listen, I always found that while we preach automation wherever we are, automation is more about size of company. At the end of the day, it's about human interaction. People need to feel like there's a safe home, that they are cared for, that we invest in them. And there's no worse or better time than times like these to show that, listen, we're going to be resilient together and come out of it together. Now, there's selfish reasons for it. I don't want to lose a guy who I've invested 2 years in and knows great domain, and then I lose him, and then in 3 months' time, I have to replace him when the market eased up a little bit. But it's also, I want him to understand that it's more than just a workplace, because, listen, I spend more time with my colleagues than I do at home. I mean, this is kind of part of the family, the extended family. So you really want to invest time in making sure that people feel that this time they're spending is not just an arbitrary workplace, but is something that they are committed to. And there's different ways of doing it. Compensation-wise, you give equity options, so you feel like you're part of it. But for me, also the personal aspect, the feeling that there is a common goal, a common agenda, a path, all these things are really important for me from that perspective, to make sure that we feel like a family. And you get to that stage where the company is small enough, you can still keep a family spirit to it. I can't expect a bank with 250,000 people to feel as much of a family, even though every small unit within it can, and there's still DNA for companies. But at our size, 60 people, 100 people, we should definitely be making sure people feel like they are part of an extended family. It's important for DNA.
I think that tribe is very, very important, hugely important part of engagement, right? And it's and it's one of the great challenges at the moment to sort of have a purpose that people believe in, and people are sort of motivated consistently, because we've heard you spoke beforehand about productivity during these sort of times, and productivity curves have have historically through if you take the lessons from east to west as we see them, we've seen companies or history teach us that there are different issues around productivity peaking and dropping at various different stages in that curve. And that lesson, I think, is really interesting to hear you talk about that and see how we can, in a very, very different set of circumstances, keep people as engaged as clearly you have done.
Yep.
Tell us a little. You talked there a little bit about the ecosystem and the changes in collaboration, etc. Let's finish on the opportunities and the way forward, and getting your crystal ball out and saying what sort of lasting impact this is going to have on the sector. I've heard people being very bullish and optimistic. I've heard people probably being a little bit more cautious, particularly around the sort of consultancies who sort of sat in that sort of world. What's your outlook say? What's going to be some of the opportunities that arise from this? What's the future hold?
Listen, let me be selfish for a bit and talk about Access Fintech and what the future holds, because it's what we're passionate about. People understand now how I can work more efficiently with a richer data set. I no longer live in a vacuum, and all I know is what I know. I need to know everything that the market knows against me, what I know against the market. I need to have tools to be able to move responsibility and move liability and understand what's important. And all that is done through a collaborative fashion. I think we're in a much different place. And I think now the conversations are, why am I doing it only for one part of my business? Why am I doing it across the business? So I think it's a very exciting time for us as our client starts thinking about a problem much more at an enterprise level than a specific problem set, desk by desk by desk. So that has been exciting. I think there's going to be a lot of new technologies that are going to be adopted. I look at Zoom in our ecosystem. Zoom has been around, but never been able to penetrate the financial market, and suddenly it's become as viable as WebEx or any other collaboration tools for that matter, because people had to make decisions and they had to embrace new technologies. So I think it's going to be very exciting from that perspective. I also have to think about the downside. I don't think we've felt the pain yet, the economic pain of what we've done. You look at the stock market, it's record highs. I mean, some of the things just kind of you sit around and you say, it just don't make sense. We still have to clear Brexit. There's still going to be elections in the US. Real economy, I think at some point is going to match a bit of the virtual economy. And I think there's going to be an impact of what happens if aviation doesn't recover, and what happens if tourism doesn't recover, and what happens if unemployment stay high. I don't think we've absorbed that into our ecosystem. So from a macro perspective, I still think that we haven't seen the impact of what this is going to have on us. But I have to jump around between the macro and the micro. On the micro perspective, I think we have a growth path which is phenomenal. I think that escape velocity that you reach where the network becomes its own magnet and pulls stuff in, I think we're at that point. So this is exciting. But we need to make sure that as a business and as an economy, we figure out what to do and how we help the whole economy keep pace and keep momentum. So it's going to be interesting 12 to 18 months. Yeah,
there's a very interesting sort of take on that with the stimulus that's been put. I mean, how much money's been pumped into the system about exactly what that means, because you're right, the markets do defy. I mean, even on Friday, what's that, the 5th of June, was it Friday? We saw some, the US figures were extraordinary, weren't they, around jobs and the impact that had on the marketplace, and just how out of kilter with how you'd expect everything to be going, and the troughs of March. It's extraordinary figures, but that stimulus creates great opportunity as well, right? With so much money pumped into it, if you look at it from an economics point of view, there's these two colliding worlds which are very, very interesting to see what, because just as much as you could paint a picture of a long and consistent recession, you can also paint the picture of a very, very quick and lucrative upside as well.
Yeah, listen, it's funny. I'm old enough. I think about the younger generations, right? They grew up since 2008 with 0 interest rate and government's printing money. That's the solution to everything. And it's endless printing of money. And I remember, growing up with 5, 7, 12% interest rates or inflation, and almost not printing money. So while you get used to it, it clearly cannot last forever, right? And you think at some point the cycles will change, not necessarily for better or for worse, but anyone who's used to cash is free and the cash is abundant and it's a question of how do you get it, there's going to be a compensation to that. And it's be interesting to see when that changes. Or is there a new branch of economy that's going to come out, which is going to be more a social economy that allows us to spread it?
Yeah, there's been so many positive steps forward for, and this will go a bit deep now, won't it? But in terms of humanity, there's been huge strides forward, and my hope is that so many of the lessons in terms of philanthropy, in terms of community, in terms of everything, sort of stays on track with that. Because if it does, as you say, look, I know you're a father. I've got 3 kids of my own. It's got a real opportunity to create something better, I think, and seeing positive change from it.
Yeah.
Roy, it's always a pleasure, and I'm very fascinated. I'm sure we will do take 3 of this as well in the not too distant future to hear about how you've continued this sort of meteoric rise of Access Fintech. I'm so pleased that you're continuing to do well and add real value to the marketplace. I think what you guys do is genuinely exceptional, and it's no surprise to hear some of those sort of figures. Although 1,000% growth is unprecedented, it takes a lot of work to put yourself in that sort of position. So congratulations with everything. Long may it continue for you, and thanks so much for sharing your time with us today. Just for anyone watching who's interested in a lot of what you're doing and saying, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yes, our LinkedIn profile is very active. You almost look at it as the new way of putting information and activity out there. So you can reach out to me personally through LinkedIn or to the company itself, or just follow us and hear what we do. We use it as a very active medium to announce all our progressions and new products.
I'll
social activities.
To that. there's some good stuff in there that always catches my eye. So thanks for sharing it, Roy. Absolute pleasure as always. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you all for watching. We'll see you soon on another episode of FinTech Focus TV.
Thank you very much. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.